Okay, hello and welcome to everyone to our afternoon with Obie Anthony. The event is being recorded. You are in listen-only mode, and please use the chat and the question and answer features if you have questions or comments during the presentation. I will be monitoring both with my colleague, Andrea Valencia, and we'll be answering the question, or we'll present the questions to Mr. Anthony following his presentation. This program celebrates National Law Day, which is held annually on May 1st and is made possible by the Book to Action grant. National Law Day celebrates the role of law in our society and to cultivate a deeper understanding of the legal profession. This year's theme is Advancing the Rule of Law Now, reminding us that we share the responsibility to promote the rule of law, defend liberty, and pursue justice. And just some information about the Book to Action grant. It's a program of the California Library Association, supported in whole and in part by the United States Institute of Museum and Library Services under the provisions of the Library Services and Technology Act, which is administered in California by the state librarian. We'd also like to thank our partners, Haywood Public Library and Solano County Library, for help marketing this event. So now I'd like to introduce the Riverside County Law Library Director, Victoria Williamson, who will be introducing our speaker, Mr. Anthony. So please take it away, Victoria.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Jenna. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Before I introduce our speaker for our National Law Day program, I want to share with you a few eye-opening statistics. There are an estimated 2.3 million individuals incarcerated in our country. The National Registry of Exoneration has recorded 2,774 exonerations in the United States. In California, 218 individuals have been exonerated since 1989. Collectively, these Californians have lost 1,915 years. African Americans are 7 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of murder than whites. Our speaker this afternoon was one of those individuals wrongfully imprisoned. At the age of 19, Obie Anthony was sentenced to life without parole for a murder he did not commit and was incarcerated for 17 years. When he was exonerated and released in 2011, Obie didn't even have an identification. He didn't have a social security card or birth certificate. After 17 years in prison, he didn't know what to write on his resume, how to land a job, or even how to use a cell phone. He had to learn on his own how to start his life all over again. In 2016, he founded Exonerated Nation and dedicated himself to helping ensure that other exonerees didn't have to face those challenges alone. Exonerated Nation is a nonprofit organization based in Oakland, whose mission is to meet the immediate needs of exonerees by helping them heal from the debilitating spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical effects of being wrongfully incarcerated, and to affect policy change for restoration and the righting of wrongs. Obie was instrumental in the passage of California Assembly Bill 672, also known as or cited as Obie's Law. This bill, enacted in 2015, requires the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation and the Department of Motor Vehicles to ensure that all eligible inmates released from the state prison have valid identification cards. This law also requires the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to assist exonerees with transitional services, including housing assistance, job training, and mental health services. Obie is a proud recipient of the 2017 Rockwood Leadership Institute Returning Citizens Fellowship and a regular speaker at Loyola Project for the Innocent, the Innocence Project, and other community dialogues about exoneration and incarceration, like this one. We are delighted to have Obie join us to share his life experience and talk about the important work his team is doing with helping exonerees in our state. Please join me in welcoming Obie Anthony, founder and executive director of Exonerated Nation.
Thank you for that warm present welcoming and opening. I'm really grateful to Riverside for hosting this and also for inviting me. In other words, on National Law Day to talk about, how I was affected by the law, and how consequently, for me, how that has changed and sort of morphed me, in other words, to a changer, so to speak, or a player within that field. So just to talk to you a little bit about myself, I was back in 1995. I was framed and put in prison for a murder robbery in which I did not commit. It was a murder that transpired in Los Angeles County, outside of a brothel located on 49th and Figueroa. The prosecutors, just to sort of kind of, to get to the meat of it, really, brought in a pimp for a witness. Had no physical evidence against my indicating I was at the scene of the crime, had no reliable identification to indicate that I was at the scene of the crime. But the prosecutor marshaled on and went forward, utilizing this pimp that they brought in, saying to the jury that this guy was an apartment manager who had ran an apartment, who had witnessed these things happening outside of the apartment. Nevertheless, and at the same time withholding and hiding the fact that this guy, who he had called a manager, was more than a manager. He was, in fact, he was an informant that had been working with the police for many years. In fact, was an individual himself who had been convicted of murder, who had shot his then wife twice in the head, but received probation because of his working with authorities. But this is not the representation that the prosecutor gave to the jury, and nor did those facts come out until many years later during the process of my exoneration. I was helped in my exoneration through the help of the Northern California Innocent Project, who took on my case back in 2008. After I had reached out to them somewhere late 2007, asking for some assistance on my case, saying that there was some information that had come to light that could possibly have helped me. They did begin to start. They took that information, started looking at it. They accepted my case in 2008. After that, I went to. They reached out to Loyola Project for the Innocent because the case was a Southern case, and the Northern California Innocent Project is primarily based in Northern California and San Jose. And so they reached out to Loyola, and Loyola reached out to them, and they began to start working with one another to help to begin to reinvestigate my case. I found myself back in front of a court at an evidentiary hearing in 2011 in front of the judge, Kevin Filer, out of Compton Court. We had about a 2-week evidentiary hearing where, they went back over the facts of the case. They brought in the witnesses. The judge had an opportunity to go over and see for themselves some of the things that the detective that was involved in my case that had done, some of the misleading and also just outright wrong things that they did, and took those things as summation and came back and found me factually innocent of that crime. Also found that the prosecutor had committed misconduct. He also had found that my then attorney was ineffective. And he also found that it was official misconduct, indicating that the detective that was involved in my case had did some wrong things. So I came home, right? 2011, I actually walked out of the door October 4th of 2011. And, it was, I don't know, it was just one of those moments in your life that you had always, one of those dreams, recurring dreams that ultimately came true. And you realize that it is that this is what it is. And, and that's what that moment was for me. And on the other side of that, I came home to nothing. I didn't have no identification because I had been in prison for 17 years. And the Department of Motor Vehicles had disposed of my identification after being in there, after being inactive for 10 years. And so I had no ID, I had no social security card. I had to locate and find my birth certificate, all of these things. And so my first 5 months home, 6 months home was just basically walking through that process right there, trying to get ID, I had to walk around for a while. I don't know if you could probably barely see it, but I have a poster on my wall. It's not even a poster, but it's a newspaper article that I used to keep with me, just so I can have ID because they have my picture and name. And so those are some of the struggles that I faced when I walked out of the door. Going through that and not having an opportunity, in other words, to be able to, to basically start off to do anything. I couldn't do nothing with no identification. I couldn't even get GR. I couldn't get nothing until I got some ID. And so that was one of the major hurdles that I had. But then after getting the ID, finding a job, social work, counseling, all of those things was just, it was just, out of sight for me because I had to deal with the computer. You have to Google this and Google that. You got to, to find this. If you don't know, ask Google and all of this stuff. And I have been gone for 17 years. And the last thing I remember was the little shoebox phone, what everybody used to walk around with. And so, I found myself in the struggle there, trying to figure things out, having to ask a lot of questions, follow a lot of directions and things like that from other individuals that had, that was home, like my fiance, friends of the family and things like that. They was like, oh yeah, you just do it like this, or you could do it like that, or even my attorneys that was involved in my case. And so that was a bit of that's what my experience was when I walked out of the door. And then, maybe a year after being home, I had a chance to go to a conference, which is called an Innocent Conference. It's a conference that they have annually to bring innocent individuals that have been exonerated from around the United States together to commune, to talk, to heal, to do those things. And so, it was there that, I began to hear the same thing from other exonerated individuals, not only that had come from California with me, but also from other states that, it took me a while to get my ID. I couldn't find a job. I'm still trying to find a job, because of this reason. They won't hire me for that. And so I was hearing these same stories and I was going through the same thing. And, it wasn't, like an aha call or action moment, but it was a process because I had to start getting it for myself. And so from that moment on, I began to start formulating things, just trying to ask questions on how to do this and how to do that. And then, I had a chance to go speak at the Capitol. And, that momentum, having that sort of kind of, helping motion going on, brought about, communication with one of the founding members of Exonerated Nation, who is now rest in peace, in Cudelis Rick Walker. And, we said, yeah, we could do this, let's do this. And so, maybe in 2015, we began to start, researching and putting the pieces together to formulate Exonerated Nation as an organization that's doing the work on the reentry side to help individuals that are suffering the same plight that we suffer from, that's going through the same emotional issues, the same traumatic issues, the same, transitional issues, to help us all navigate in some sort of manner or another in a unison way, to not only help us heal, but also to help us do things uniformly together to confront policies, to change things. And so Exonerated Nation was formed in 2016. And we've been doing, just that, sticking to our stated mission, helping to heal the debilitating effects of being framed and put in prison for crimes that we didn't commit, and also educating and informing, utilizing the opportunity, in other words, to take advantage of platforms such as this, in other words, to talk about, the importance of, not only for us, but for people, period, to be informed on the law and how to protect yourself. I think that was one of the issues for us, all of us, is that we were all landings of the law, went through the process from the gate. And so a lot of things that was going on, we were unaware of. And so we got taken advantage of by the system that, was there, in other words, to do the opposite. And so, we thought to also to do things on an educational way. And so we also established a leadership development program, in other words, to effectuate that. And so we focus on the things that is necessary, in other words, for the individual to have tools on the ready, in other words, out here in this society, that in which what we didn't have, in other words, so that we connect them to individuals to help facilitate that. And it's been an enjoyable thing to do because it's helped me heal at the same time. And so, just sticking to our stated mission, doing the work within that field there, in other words, to help individuals, and at the same time, having a conversation with the greater community about, about policy, about, what does the community believe is that is needed, and what does the community believe is an opportunity, for us to pursue in respect to, changing, or getting things put in place. And so, it's been tremendous work. I've been excited. I've been enjoying. I've been home now for 10 years, going on 10 years in October of this year. And, it's just been that sort of kind of ride of a roller coaster. It's been a struggle, but it's also been, it's been a struggle to get uphill, but it's been a joy to ride the coastline, ride the line down, because things are good, right? And so you don't have to struggle so much. And so I've been enjoying that process as well. And, and at the same time, finding myself in ways, in other words, to continue to not only talk about, criminal justice reform, but in a light and in a way where it's birthed from accountability, right? I'm always having a conversation with individuals about how can we have true reform without accountability? If individuals are not held accountable for trampling over the reform within front of them, and we only look to reform that which they trampled over and not place in any sort of accountability mechanisms in there, in other words, to stop individuals like George Costello, the prosecutor that was involved in my case, from doing the things that he did, or like putting mechanisms in place to hold Marcella Wynn and Pete Resiskus accountable for framing individuals like myself that was innocent and putting them in prison for crime they didn't commit, then it's only there for them to do again. Because without any accountability, reform is left without any protection. And so, yes, I do talk about accountability, and at the same time, I talk about, along those lines, about reform and accountability going together hand in hand like a glove. And so, and with that, it's, you also, in those conversations, you also have conversations about prison reform and what that looks like, and how is that, in which ways, in other words, that we can approach that. And again, starting off from the top with accountability. But again, when we're looking at having, direct impact in respect to prison reforms, how can we immediately get involved? And that is, that ways to do that is about, establishing programs that is acceptable by the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation up under their rehabilitative status, to expand education. Right? Where are we at? What are we doing? We are at the law library, right? And so we need to be able to give individuals in there access to that knowledge, to up-to-date information, so that they can formally address issues, in other words, that they may see in or represent those things to attorneys that may be representing them. But without adequate law libraries, without adequate information, without adequate access to those things, then it's all for none. And so one of the things that we can do, or that can be done in respect to prison reform is concerned, is programmatically, is to implement programs within these institutions that creates educational opportunities in vehicles for individuals to have this and access to that. Because that was the reason why you don't have to emphasize access, because one of the issues for me when I was fighting my case in there was access, right? And so, you know, when you go to, you know, if you're in a hold, you have to have an immediate deadline to have access to the law library. If you're even on the main line, you have to have something pending, in other words. So you just can't go in there and just go do research. That part, you don't have access, total access to being able to shepherdize the information. And so you left to have to be going through, you know, outdated information to be able to trying to adequately speak to that which you're trying to address, whether on the appellate level, whether back down in the state courts, because you have to go back down to exhaust the remedy without having it to look like it's a successive writ. And so, you know, those are the things that can happen in respect to, you know, sort of kind of what can we do immediately? Well, you know, that can be done is starting programs or begin to start having conversations about implementations around programs, educational programs that everyone has access to. You know, I had life without the possibility of parole, and I couldn't get to certain programs because of it. So, you know, those are some of the things that I believe that, you know, can happen in respect to prison reform is concerned.
Are you ready for questions?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Someone asks, can the judges that rule on the misconduct on the case penalize the attorneys, DA, or detectives and police?
Well, in the state of California, I believe that is the case. Specifically in Los Angeles County, thankfully to Assemblywoman Patty Lopez, who a few years back, I believe in 2017 or 16, that a bill was passed, AB 1909, that holds prosecutors accountable for withholding information against a person's innocence when they are found to doing those things willfully and knowingly. And so, so now in the state of California, there has been a law that has been put in that's created. They get jail time and they get fined for that, but it has to be something that the judge has determined that was done intentionally.
So if you have any questions, you can use the chat or the Q&A feature. And I have a question for you. So as the executive director of Exonerated Nation, what does a typical day look like for you?
Wow, a lot of conversations, I'm gonna tell you. I'm having conversations with exonerated individuals because I am an exoneree, right? So I've been affected. So, you know, we stay on contact on those bases. But also, we're also talking about ways, in other words, we can talk what kind of programs. Then also, you know, I run a phone with board members or other individuals from other organizations to talk about Exonerated Nation. So it's been a lot of, you know, that's the typical day, really that part, really, you know, seeking partnerships, having conversations with partners, you know, looking for grants, trying to be creative. To bring the body together. Zoom is hard, you know, doing a creative Zoom, having a convening is a challenge. And I'm always working on that too.
Okay, we have some more questions going in. So how did you retain hope when you were in prison for so many years? What was the most important source of support when you were re-entering society after release from prison?
So to the first part of that question, being innocent, I knew that I was innocent, you know? And I knew I didn't do it. And it was just, I said to myself, one, I just could never accept the time they said I had life without plus 50 years. It just never made sense to me. And so I never accepted those words in my mind. And so it didn't affect my body. So it didn't have me depressed. It didn't have me stressed because I didn't accept it. And so it allowed for me to hold on to my hope. And that, you know, the truth will come out. that ultimately, I just, I leaned on the faith that I had in regards to the truth coming out. And that, how, I didn't know, right? So how it was going to come out, when it was going to come out. But I nevertheless, I held on it through that way. And, just staying just firm, just knowing that at some time, I used to say this, that, and forgive me, it was just crazy little guy. I used to say, because it was a book. It's this book called Killing Scenes and Homicides in LA that was written some years ago by this news reporter by the name of Miles Cohen. And when the book came out, I think it was like 96, the book came out. And I ended up getting the book maybe sometime in 98. And I used to say, it's gonna be some little old white lady's gonna read this book. They're gonna say this kid got a raw deal. They're gonna help me because you have to understand. For us, we live our lives on sayings and things like that, and we always say, well, certain people ain't gonna read this and blah blah blah. I used to say, man, some little lady ain't gonna read this book because she's sitting down there reading, gonna say, oh, this is a bad story, and reach out to someone. And so that was another thing that always kept my hope up alive because. I counted on that, right? And consequently, I get a laugh out of Lori Levinson now from Loyola Project from the Edison because she thinks that she's this little white Jewish lady and said, oh, I'm this little white lady you was talking about. So, little things like that keeps your help alive. And the second part of that question was?
The second part was, what was the most important source of support when you were re-entering society after the release from prison?
It was from, to tell you the truth, the most important support at that time was from my then fiance. Without being able to come home to her or having that opportunity to come home, I've been on the streets. My mother passed away January 1994, right after the Northridge earthquake, so I couldn't come home to her. My dad and my grandparents was all out in Missouri, told you I couldn't get out to them because I had no ID to get on a plane, had no money to do none of that. So, that was the most important thing. And then to them being accepted, right? Even by the individuals who was in the process of my exoneration, they believed in me. They believed in my innocence. And that was very important. That was a very important on walking out because I knew, it just wasn't me no more saying this. And so, all of those things was very important for me because it kind of helped me, it helped me kind of think about things, helped me, not be stressing about this and stressing about that. I kind of, I had it in my mind. I always feel like I had somebody I could call for some help if I was needing some help. So that was, for me, that was what's most important when I came.
Thank you. So there's another one. Google recently launched its Career in Digital Training initiative for formerly incarcerated individuals called Grow with Google, Career Readiness for Reentry. It said that it is a part of its broader initiative of investing $40 million in criminal justice reform nonprofits. Have you or your foundation seen more of this kind of support from big tech companies, either through outright donation or collaboration to bring similar kinds of programming?
Wow. No, I was unaware that Google even did that, was doing that. That's something I have to look into. Thank you for educating me right there. But, we've gotten great support from Kaiser, from K2K Monarski and Liv, which is a civil law firm based out of Pasadena. We've gotten great support from organizations like Mojo, which is a production company. And we're grateful to that. And we reach out to big organizations such as Google for their support. But what I've been realizing and understanding and seeing is that these big organizations and foundations and philanthropists are unaware of the exonerated, right? Of the innocent people who are coming home. And so you go through this sort of kind of different door because just like Google said, it's for re-entry, and that is surrounding our returning citizen population. And that's because they haven't, they've had conversations, maybe or maybe not, in their executive positions with individuals that come from our demographics to have us inclusive. One of the things that we felt and came home to, because even when it came to, when we're talking about Obie's law, it's a similar thing, right? Because Obie's law 8672 connected individuals to the same things that at least parolees and returning citizens was having access to. And so that was what that was about, because there was nothing there, because no one had the conversation. And so when you have entities such as this, Google, Amazon, and so forth, that do these sort of things, it really is about the returning citizen population. And because it's such a large body, I think like 3,000 people come home a day, versus an exonerated person, maybe anywhere between 3 to 7 a year. And so when they're looking at the population of individuals that you're talking about, and let's use California as an example, where you have 218 individuals that has been exonerated. And when they're looking at, well, how many people are you serving? That pocket is just not big enough for them to want to be able to do real big stuff, because they say, well, it's only 217 of you, where they're looking at thousands of individuals who's coming home on probation and parole. So it creates a sort of a little, just a little hurdle, not a big hurdle.
So there's another question, 2 more. So we'll do the one that came up first. What does Bryan Stevenson's book Just Mercy and the film adaptation mean to you?
I mean a lot, man. I mean, like what Bryan Stevenson did with that in the film. I had a chance to speak a couple of times at, Opie's is another film. I seen the film. He brings, what he did there. He brings this, what I'm doing here, to picture. I can't do that. I can't do that. I'm grateful that he can, and I'm glad that he did. Because now people that are aware of that are having those conversations. Innocent people suffering on death row, And then what does that look like for the individuals in the general population who may be sitting there with life without, or may have taken deals for crimes in which they didn't commit because they didn't want to go to death row. And so he opened the conversation, and I'm really grateful to Bryan Stevenson and what he does. In respect to criminal justice reform and the recognition that he brings what's happening here, because like I said, he put a voice on this emotion that I go through every single day. Something I cannot get away from. Something he put a picture and a voice on prison traumatic stress, and so that the public can realize and understand that you do have people across the United States that are suffering, So, and I think that's the term mercy is what we all wanted, right? Man, like somebody have some mercy on us. Like why is, the question, why is this happening? Please have mercy on me. No one wanted to be, I didn't want to sit in there. I didn't want to have to, see people get killed or hurt, or I don't want to have to defend myself from none of that stuff, So.
When you were saying, answering the question about what helped you get through prison, and you said you knew you were innocent, it reminded me of both Walter McMillan and Anthony Ray Hinton, which were 2 of Bryan Stevenson's clients who were innocent and wrongfully convicted and put on Alabama's death row. I believe that Walter McMillan served 6 years and Anthony Ray Hinton served 28 years. And so just the knowledge that you were innocent, the life preserver that you hold on to. So I thought that was very indicative, or just tying in with their feeling too. But in the screening that we did yesterday of the HBO documentary, I thought that Anthony Ray Hinton's quote of this was really telling. He said that people will come up to him and say like, oh, the system worked because you were released. He said, well, if the system would have worked, I would have never gone in the first place. That's what I think is so heartbreaking about stories of exonerees, is it's such a triumph to have you released from prison. However, it's just, why were you put there in the first place? Like, we shouldn't even be having this conversation. So I think it's hard, that tension between those 2 things.
Absolutely.
It's hard to sit with.
Well, because it's the recognition that the system has filled their plate with winning and have taken justice and blindfolded and put her in the back, cuffed the presumption of innocence, and so that they can prevail for their own self, for their reasons. And again, we cannot get away from the fact that yes, you have to look at the fact that it is economics, right? That you cannot, they got 2.6 million people incarcerated in some facet or another. You cannot begin to start fathoming dropping that number down to 700,000 and not think about what they would do to them economically.
So there's another question. Did you have to file anything after your release to expunge your record?
Yes. And as a matter of fact, during my, doing, what was that, 2012, Definitely Focus had a campaign going on, Proposition 34, to remove the death penalty from the state of California. And, I had volunteered to get signatures, so I stood out in front of Walmarts and Targets and everywhere in this Apple Valley I could. And one of the individuals who was also working on that campaign by the name of Jenny Wolford, who was the ex-warden of San Quentin, asked me, hey, look, asked me about, do I know whether or not if those things was expunged or not. So she had an associate at the Department of Justice, contacted them and found out that in fact, no, I had not, right? That I was still on record as being, in prison for that murder. And so we began to start making, filing and doing those necessary things there. But no, yes, you have to file. It's not something that's done automatically. Well, it wasn't then. Now, since the passage of AB 1050, it's an automatic expungement, right? And so it's supposed to go all the way up to the Department of Justice automatically when the court recognizes that individual's been exonerated. AB 1050 was passed just recently, and we're in 21, so that was in 18.
So the next question is, there's a lot of discussion about systemic racism following the trial regarding George Floyd and the national discussion about police brutality. What do you think about systemic racism and how that played a role in your unjust conviction and imprisonment?
Major, the racism conversation is grand, and it's not a conversation. I think it's a conversation we have continuously because, we don't want to get it. I don't think the larger, I don't know if it's a larger portion, but you just don't want to get rid of it in that fact because you have to acknowledge it, right? You have to, some point or another, say that it is happening. And so because you have a fight that is not, that becomes an issue. But in respect to sort of one of my thoughts is about it, as far as the system is concerned, it's obvious. My entire life is based upon those systemic issues of racism within the system, from being redlined, not me being redlined, but my grandmother, my great grandmother. They blocked her out from buying houses in a place where she could have progressed so that it would be better for me, right? And so it just didn't start for me. And they do racism, is within the entire system in itself, economic system, in the education system, in the prison system, in the criminal justice system. And so when we talk about racism, we have to talk about it in its real sense. And when we talk about how did it affect me? And again, just my growing up, I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, and so you have to understand that systematically what happened in Los Angeles in 1980, the government came in and dropped cocaine in the community, in other words, for it to be mass produced and sent and pushed to the community. So that's, we have to deal with those sort of type of things. But then how did it play effect in my case? So we look at, 1994, think about what the work environment was for women, period, in 94. Women still having the issue in the work environment now. But then when we look at, the issues surrounding minority women within that work environment was more so than it was for their counterparts. And so we had a detective that was involved in Marcella Wynn, was an African-American woman who was working, who had rose her way up in the rank, was working in the homicide division, got landed in the homicide division by way of assistance through another officer. But nevertheless, she was the only Black woman on the homicide division. And so we see what they say, well, it was a Black woman who did this to you. Yeah, but nevertheless, it was not the system, but what was taught to her in respect to how the system goes that facilitated the work. So she was told by her counterparts that, hey, look, you don't want to turn all of the evidence over to the defense. You give them a chance to beat them. So she was taught ways, in other words, to how to do things by the system, no matter whether she was Black or Mexican, the information that she was taught was coming from that place. And so that's how it affected me, because systematically, it wasn't I think it wasn't some whites or it's another group that did it to me. It was a Black woman who framed it. But by way of the justification and her right and her, this is how you win attitude, it came from that place.
So the next question is, when reading Just Mercy, we saw how Walter McMillan felt the effects of his conviction till the end of his life. For example, the assisted living facility still considered him a felon despite his exoneration. Does this experience still follow you in any legal way?
Yes, credit-wise. So right now, credit-wise, so TransUnion, Transamerica, any of those entities, they have an investigative tool, in other words, to where, when they go, it's still there. So it's a still mark there for me. And why does that matter? Is because they can technically deny me for a student loan because of it. People say, oh, ain't nothing, you this and you that. Well, what if I went to go try to get a student loan and they went to go do all of this stuff right here, and TransUnion have these things marked down on my, and I didn't even know it's credit report, right? You didn't even, well, who would ever think to see whether or not if the credit people got you down as being wrongfully convicted and how that stuff has been off or not. And so it's still following me to this very day. Even just on a personal level, just between family and friends. You always hear, well, you out now. That ain't how we do it. Or, that's how, that was, you got that from prison, kind of stuff. No one wants to hear that, in around anything, whether it's education, whether it's a way of life, whether it's a way of talking. You don't want to, And so, it still follows you no matter what. And specifically for me, as you can tell, I can't get away from the suffering of it. The emotion of it has crippled me to a point where I cannot, so yes, it still follows me.
From Just Mercy, I think it was Anthony Ray Hinton. I think it was the prosecutor wrote like a memoir, and in the memoir he said, to this day, Anthony Ray Hinton he's a murderer, right, even though he'd been exonerated. So I think that's just another example of just because you're out, it doesn't mean that, and just because you're exonerated, right, doesn't mean that goes away. Right. I have a question for, how do exonerees find your organization? Do you find them? Is it word of mouth? How can they find out and get help from you?
A little bit of both, word of mouth. I reach out through the Innocent Projects, specifically in the state of California, and some outside of the state of California. They get informed about the Exonerated Nation, and they'll look us up online. And individuals reach out, but I also have, people who are incarcerated, family members who seeking justice for their family members, who also reach out to me through that platform there, and through also off of Facebook, Instagram. I try to get involved with all of the social media platforms for the purpose of being seen. Here we are. How can we help? Specifically for those individuals who are coming home. But those, we're really we're really working on with the innocent networks in the state of California to create a formidable apparatus, in other words, to see that the exonerees are connected to the right resources, and then they're able to help to facilitate them through their transition when they walk out of their doors, because you do have other after innocent care programs in the state of California that are out there too as well. So.
So there's no more questions, although someone might be typing, so we can give them a minute. I think in our conversation before we started at 1, you said that you used the law library at the prison that you were at. And I think you discussed the difficulty in access to that. And I was looking online, and the CDC, they're trying to do like digital or online where they give you a tablet. Have you heard anything about that? And like, I still think there's probably going to be access issues.
Well, yeah. I think they, so I came home in 2011. And they hadn't started that yet, but I haven't been hearing about the programs and about they use intranet, and through their intranet, they're able to sort of kind of see and control the information. One of the things again, but I think that I don't know if that's happening at all. What is it, 43 prisons in the state of California? I don't know if that's happening at all of the institutions or 37 or something like that. But I know like at LA County or at the Lancaster, they're utilizing it, and it is about access. So again, whether or not I don't know whether or not if all inmates are having access to those tools. I would imagine that I don't know. I haven't heard anything about it in a specific way, like saying that we have these tablets. However, they're outdated. The information on there is the same thing we're getting that's in the law library. Again, getting back to that was the struggle for us, is the fact that you can give us access, so you open access to some outdated information. You're not doing us no good. But I don't know in respect to, I haven't heard anything specific around that, the tablets.
Thank you. Maybe it's too new. Another question came in. You spoke about the support you had when you were exonerated, but I imagine there was still difficulty acclimating to new technology, getting a new ID and more. What was the most difficult part about getting your identifying records when you feel like you have no resources?
I mean, dealing with the Social Security office is a headache. I'm gonna let you know, like they are something else. They are something else. Like man, I think I told them that too. I said, you are something else for this. You don't send me through all of this. It's dealing with them. It's like dealing with them because they are so uninformed, right? And so, so Social Security or the DMV, because their lack of knowledge of what to do in there. Like, well, what do we do? This guy don't have. He's been in prison. We don't have no ID, no anything like that. The only thing they try to do is to send you through there. So that right there was dealing with them and them not having no real process to sort of funnel me through. And so when I dealing with the Social Security, I had to go back and forth, make sure you get your birth certificate. Then you had to do another form of this. And it was just a lot. It was a lot. I think that's what really took so long, waiting on that card.
Kind of the bureaucracy was the difficult.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you would, and it really fell back though on the CDCR, because the CDCR wasn't keeping my information updated to the Department of Motor Vehicles. So every certain amount of years, they're supposed to update your information with the Department of Motor Vehicles, because I'm still living, but they wasn't doing that. And so individuals was just coming home with no ID after a certain avenue was in there for that long time, or over the 10 years.
For the CDCR to not update that, I guess, I don't know if you have an answer, but maybe is it because they're overstaffed or that just fell through the cracks? Like, is that something that's common for other people in prison, is that they just don't do the extra step to do it?
Well, so when we look at individuals, from our perspective, when you're looking at individuals coming home on probation and parole, they have to see a counselor prior to, right? So they go see the counselor connects them to their parole officer. They let them know these are your parole steps, this is what's coming up, so forth and so on. And so they automatically get that walkthrough when it comes to the identification. That doesn't happen for the exonerated person because the unknown for whether or not if this person is going to get exonerated or not. So they don't have the counselor that comes in, they don't have everything was having to happen on the come out. That's when the process started. And so, you know, for you know, when Obie's law AB 672 came into effect, it was to create that automatic mechanism for the CDCR to say to the CDCR, and it wasn't about them being understaffed or none of the above. They just wasn't doing it, right? They just was just, you know, they just wasn't doing it. Like, hey, look, you're supposed to be doing this. Like, why? Like, what happened? You know, and that's sort of kind of what they respond to. Was again, it fell through the cracks.
That goes back to what you were speaking about earlier about accountability. If no one is
Right.
watching and enforcing and having them do that, then they're not going to do it.
Right. Like a 2-year-old. It's like a 2-year-old. You turn around, you get on the phone, the 2-year-old is going to run off and get into everything that, you know, whatever experimental thing they're going to do. And because there's no guardian watching that. And that's what accountability acts as, a guardian to protect those things for individuals to not just trample over them, making sure that you check the box.
So we have 2 more questions, which might be our last 2 because it's 1:53. So the first question is, can you tell us more about what we as individuals can do to help, whether it's preventing people from being wrongfully accused, helping people currently incarcerated, or helping people on their way out?
Oh man. You know, I got a bill.
They can support Exonerated Nation.
Hey, wait a minute, look, oh man, look. So I have with me this Liberty Bell here. So I have the bell. So, you know, he told me to ring the bell. The first thing you can do is to donate to Exonerated Nation, support. I say that to say this is that, you know, for the last 10 years, I've been dedicating my entire time to the work. And it, you know, and I realized that you know, it's working and it's good, but it's not gonna continue to work without the support of the community. And I need that to happen financially because I have to bring the body together. There's a lot of things that happen. The other thing that you can do is, again, is to, you know, specifically, you know, when it comes to the lawyers, is whatever field of law that you've maybe gotten into, volunteer with the Innocent Projects to ask, how can I help? Right? How can I help you today? It may just be, you know, they're looking for a staff person to help with litigation in a specific area, or they may be looking for volunteers, you know, to go through the letters or something like that. It really is, you know, to putting our hands in the mix. I think when we look at ways to help Mom in the kitchen when she's cooking, we go in there and grab random things. Hey, Mom, what about this? And so, you know, we take that same kind of action when it comes to those groups that's doing the work. You know, the law library is put there, you know, for the community to take advantage of, for us to go in there and go look at the work, go in there and go do it. And that's what organizations like Exonerated Nation is there for, and Innocent Projects is there for individuals to go in there, hey, look, what are you doing? How can we help? And this is what we bring to that.
Thank you. And maybe the final one. Those of us who are learning about this kind of injustice, kind of the same question. What can we do to help change systemic racism in our country? So again, work with the Innocence Project.
Yeah, that part, but the other part of it is to open those conversations up with your assembly individual, the person who represents where you're from, right? Have these conversations with them, or even at your churches too, or with your family and community. In other words, to maybe to take that there, because you know when we looking at, you know, we say, well, I do this and I do that. Well, you can make a call and hey, look, hey, what are you guys doing about this? Are you aware of this? Just calling them, saying something to your representative of your state, or your county, or your city where you're from, means a lot. It helps a lot because it puts it on their radar. So those are other ways that you can do too.
Since we're winding down, it's 1:56. Is there any closing remarks that you would like to say to us?
Yeah, I mean, like it is, and thank you for that. Once again, thank everyone for, you know, coming in and having a day with me today at the library. I really appreciate that. You know, I love words, and just so happen I'm in the law library, which is even better because you can really learn some words in there. But I really appreciate everyone for coming in. I really appreciate Riverside and the law library for having me. You know, what I want to say to you guys is this, is that, you know, part of the reason why I was in prison for this is it was identification issues too, where I looked at like someone else. The guy, it was a cross-racial identification. The guy said, well, he looked at like the guy. And, you know, I'm always, and I go around and say to people is that, you know, I ask them, how many times in your life has someone said that you look like someone, or that you reminded them of someone, or actually tapped you on the shoulder thinking that you was that person? And so just remember that it can happen to you. And because that it can happen to you, and because you had an opportunity, in other words, to know that it happened to me, you know, don't be the person just got, you know, watching the neighbor's house blow down, you know, burn down because and the wind is blowing the other way. Don't not thinking that the wind won't shift. The wind can shift and burn your house down. So help put the fire out.
Well, thank you. On behalf of Riverside County Law Library, I want to thank you for speaking today. We were really excited to have you for our National Law Day, like keystone event. We hope that those in attendance, that your story has impacted and that our attendees feel compelled to have a conversation, maybe those tough conversations with families, or call your representative, or feel called to volunteer with the Innocence Project or donate to the Exonerated Nation. I want to
Thank you. You went mute. Can't hear you.
I think she muted herself accidentally.
Yeah. Again. You muted again.
Is Victoria? Victoria might be muting me. Anyway, I won't. So Hayward Public Library is having an event, which I put in the chat, next Saturday, May 15th at 2 o'clock. It's with the Medea Project with Rhodessa Jones. And every time I go to the screen to read about it, it puts me on mute. So I'm not going to do that. She does like plays with formerly incarcerated individuals. And so, yes. And then on Saturday, May 8th, she's putting it in the chat for me. Thank you, Sally. At 2 p.m., there's a film and discussion with Eddie Zhang. And then the May 15th one, speaker and performance, the Rhodessa Jones and the Medea Project. So those are both through Hayward Public Library that we invite you to go to as well, just to continue this conversation that we're doing with Just Mercy on systemic injustices, especially like systemic racial injustice, and especially wrongfully convicted individuals and even individuals that did commit the crime but aren't receiving true justice because their lawyers are not, they're not representing them well, or like in your case, Obie, that the police department was withholding evidence. So there's a lot of factors and players that are going into court cases, and there's just a lot of room for mistakes and injustice to happen. And so we ask that you continue to engage with us and discuss criminal injustice.
Yes.
So thank you again for speaking with us today. We were really excited. I wish we could have done it in person, but you know, the sign of the times, we have to do it via Zoom. So maybe one day we can actually have you come down in person.
I would love that. I would love that. And you know, I'm gonna do a little research too myself in between time, in the hopes that I will be able to come there in person, because I think when we say this to each other, right, that when we think about the word wrong in itself, it implies mistake, right? It's the implication of mistake. It was a wrong happened, but they didn't do this wrong. They did this intentionally to me. And so we have to remember that and protect ourselves, protect our others, and continue to be informative. Thank you, Riverside.
Thank you. And the recording will be made available via email on Monday. I will send it out to the attendees, and then we will be posting it on our YouTube. So thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of the Saturday. Thank you.
Bless.